Welcome back to Windows Student Database Application Part 2. So we have created database in MS SQL Server and we have created a Windows Forms as well. In step 3 we are going to learn how to link Windows Forms to the database. So for which you need to have basic knowledge about something like system data SQL client. It is very simple. System is a namespace, nothing but collection of classes. So again, data is also a namespace, which is inside the namespace system. And then again we have SQL client. This is also a namespace, which is inside data, which means system namespace has data namespace. Data namespace has SQL client namespace, which means this namespace has related classes, which are very known. So this is one header which we need to include whenever we are trying to connect a forms to the database. This is one header which we need to include in any of the forms code part. So what exactly the code looks like? So this is the code to be written for inserting data to the database. To the forms, you are trying to insert data. When you click insert button in the form 1, it has to store the data in the database. So the code which gets executed is this. This is the code. So let's analyze what is this code. So we have a connection string, namely to establish a connection between the application and the database. So this is a connection string. What is the connection string will have? It will have the database. College is the database which you have created, if you have remembered. Then the data source, nothing but this is the server name. Which server you are using? So here I have written MIT MCA staff SQL Express, which I have shown you during the opening of database software. So there we have seen user PC SQL Express. So here we need to use user PC SQL Express. This is server name. In my machine I have the server called user PC SQL Express. Then we have integrated security true. Nothing but it's a Windows authentication. To access the database, we need to provide the authentication like username and password. Since we are using Windows authentication for the database software, here we are giving it as integrated security true. Very simple. So this is just about connection string. So SQL connection is a class which is there inside this particular namespace. So now we are creating an object. This is the code. We have created an object for a connection string. More than enough. Next, we are trying to write a query. We are trying to insert data into database like text box 1 is nothing but your USN. Text box 2 is nothing but your name. And then we have age. That is text box 3. We are trying to insert these text box data to the database with the query insert into table name values. This is the query which we usually write it with what exactly 3 attributes, that is USN, name and age. This is the query which the complete query we are storing it in a string. We have complete query here. Remember, do not miss any of the single characters of this. So what is better thing is through the PPT copy and paste it. It's the best solution for it. Once we have the query and the connection string exactly, then we try to open the connection between database to the forms. So this is the connection string we are using and trying to say open. The connection gets established between the application and the database. Next is we are trying to execute the query. So this is also one more class SQL command and we are trying to create an object. This is also part of the namespace SQL client. Namespace will have related classes. So here in this object we are passing two attributes to initialize the connection string as well as the query. This is our connection string and this is our query. S is the query. So we are trying to execute the command. Once we are written, we will try to execute non-query, which means we are trying to insert data into the database and we don't expect any retrieval part. We are not expecting any retrieval from the database. We are trying to save data. So command is the object dot, this is a function. Execute non-query is a function of the class SQL command. This is an object, object dot function. We are executed. Once it successfully executes, if there is no error, then we try to close the connection. So whatever the connection we are trying to open, we need to close it. So this is all about inserting data into the database. This is the code. We'll directly copy paste to the PPT and then we'll execute it. Once insertion is done, let's see whether it works fine or not. So let me copy this complete code. Go to the application. When we perform during insertion, that has to happen. So double click. So this is where we are going to write Control V. I've written the code. So since it is these two are giving error, we have an error with these two statements. So why is that we are not included the namespace? It is nothing but header file. We'll include it. Once we include, it has got the reference. So this can be included only if you have installed MS SQL Server. Next, if you are observing, this is our database name, this is our server name, which I would like to change it. What is our server name? Server name is, say this is our server name. In your PC you could have different. Copy this server name, copy this, and exactly give it here. Paste it the server name, and this has to be escape sequence has to be written. This is the escape sequence. This is our thing. So we have a database, text box one, that is what we have tried to use it. Then we are done with this. So we have written the complete code. We have written the complete code for insertion part. So let's see whether it works fine or not. I'm running the application. I'm giving data 4MHMCA01. The name Ashwin. Then age 123. Then insert. So there has been no such message called as inserted successfully because we have not written any message. So let's see if there is no error, then let's see whether the data has been stored or not. So if you want to see that, I'll try to execute refresh. Once it is done, then college database, there the table, then again right click, select top 1000 rows. You could observe that we have the data in the database. This is the data. You want to try one more? Could give one more as 02, Ashwin 2 and 5. Insert. And here let me refresh and then execute this query. So we have the data. So it's getting stored. So we have successfully inserted the data into the database through application form. Now I'll try to give retrieve. I have not written any data, which means that both the data has to be retrieved. So let's write the code for retrieving part, for which let's see what exactly code looks like. So here also we have a connection string. Same thing, database name, server name, and Windows authentication, that is true. Then what is the query? We are trying to retrieve the data, which means select star from student. This is the SQL query to retrieve data from the database college and table student. So all the fields we are trying to retrieve. Once we have retrieven, so we are trying to make use of SQL adapter class. This is again in your SQL client namespace. So we have This is also class available in SQL client namespace, and we are trying to create an object wherein we are providing the connection string as well as the query. What exactly this adapter is? Adapter is nothing but collection of tables. Many tables you can have it in a single adapter. So multiple tables. Say you can have student table, you can have course table, you can have marks table, you can have many tables, you can have it. It's a collection of tables. So this is what many tables, many data it can store. Now we'll try to open the connection. Then we are trying to retrieve, when we execute this query, we'll get rows and columns. Say USN, name and age, those are the three columns, and the data, two data, Ashwin 1 and Ashwin 2. So what we get is an output as table. So it will be in the rows and columns. So we make use of a data table kind of a class where we are trying to fill in whatever we have received from the database. So this is where we have retrieved from the database, and this is the table which we are trying to store. We are storing the complete data from the data adapter to the table. So rows and columns, complete data is available. Next, what we need to bind the data to the grid view. So grid view, if you have remembered in our form 2, we have a grid view kind of a thing to view data table details. So it will have rows and columns. So as such, grid view is a control of our form, and we are trying to bind the data. So we are trying to bind the data which is there in table and the data source. This is the statement. Once we have binded the data to the grid view, we will be able to view it. Till then, the data will be available in table, which means from the database we have taken the data to the data table, and now we are trying to bind the data table to the grid view. This is how we are supposed to do. So from the database to the table and then to the grid view. So once we are done, we will show it, and then we'll show the grid view, which means it will appear in the grid view, and we can close the connection. So let's see whether this code works fine or not. Copy the complete code for the retrieval. Go to your application. There is a form 1, this is a form 2. So when it has to happen, it has to happen during the retrieve button, which means in the form 2 we need to go form 2, we need to open the source code of form 2, that is, this is form 2 source code. If you want to open the form 2 source code, say function F7, function F7, press function F7, it will open your source code. Here we are trying to copy that data. Whenever this form gets opened, we are trying to establish. So same data we are trying to save it. Again it is asking error, so we'll include using system. So error goes off. Then we need to change the server name which is available here. What is our server name? Server name is user PC, as it is we are copying it, changing it to user PC. Save it. Now completed. Let's run the application. So we have the data stored. Now let's review it, retrieve the data. So we have not established the link in this. When we perform this form has to open. That part we have not written. So we'll go back. We'll say form 1. Here we need to, in the form 1 design, double click. We'll open the function. So we need to call that form. So how do we call another form here? We'll create an object. Form 2. Form 2 is the object name, because form 1 is one class, form 1 is one class, form 2 is another class. We are trying to create an object for form. In form 1, insert or retrieve button, we are creating an object of form 2. So form 2 object is equal to new form 2. I've created an object, so which means I'll call the form 2. So watch the next video for the continuation.